Hey guys, welcome to this week's video. For those of you that are new to my channel, my name is Lauren and I am a financial coach. Last week we discussed our inner critic, what it is, where it comes from, and how to reprogram it. If you haven't had a chance to check out that video, I highly suggest watching it before watching today's video. If you did watch it, great. We are going to dive deeper into our inner critic. Now, as you recall, my inner critic I call Deb. No offense to all the Debs out there. I know a lot of lovely Debs, but for some reason, my inner critic just jives with the name Deb. Another thing you probably remember from last week's video, and I hope you do, it was one of the main takeaways, is that our inner critic is not the same thing as us. We are separate from our inner critic, hence naming it. The other beauty of naming our inner critic is that now we won't take anything personally when we talk about our inner critic, or again, Deb in my case. Because today we're going to talk about the 4 common personality traits of inner critics. So stick around to the end of the video and I will actually tell you exactly where Deb falls with these personality traits. But first, we want to hop into what they are and what they mean, and also how we can combat them. And as you probably remember from last week's video, we want to make sure that we ignore, protect, and observe our inner critic. So it's really crucial for us to fully understand our inner critic's personality traits so that we can help them in our best way to protect and tame them. So let's jump right in. The first personality trait that is very common with inner critics is the worrier. Sometimes when thinking of our inner critic, it's helpful to think of a person that we know that shares that personality trait. Because remember, our inner critic is not us. They are separate from us. So it's helpful to envision that person that shares those traits. So for the worrier, it's that person that literally picks out anything that could go wrong in every single situation. They really fear the what ifs of life. And they're often filled with anxiety in addition to that fear. They're really out of touch with the true odds of something happening, and instead they always expect the worst. They also tend to get consumed with negative news, things like natural disasters, car accidents, crime, etc. So if your Deb is a worrier, don't worry. Sorry, I had to do that. You can tame the worrier merely by utilizing reassurance and de-stressing techniques. So you might want to do things like visualization, meditation, breathing exercises, minimalism with your scheduling, surround yourself by easygoing people, and even you can use what we call exposure techniques, which I get into a little bit more in some of my other videos. The second common personality trait for your inner critic, and again, these aren't in any particular order, but they're the 4 most common personality traits of inner critics. It's, well, the critic. All right, I know, not very creative, but it's accurate. And you know this type. They point out all of the flaws, the glass is half empty type of person. They cling to any kind of mistake that someone makes and they're highly judgmental. They often become consumed with comparison and they even sometimes find negative in your accomplishments or your wins. Again, if your Deb is a critic, always finding fault in things, you can rein her in. One way would be to learn more about the growth mindset. I actually have quite a few videos on my channel that talk about the growth mindset and give wonderful exercises that you can use to really implement changes so that your growth mindset can evolve. The exercises that I talk about literally rewire your brain. It's really cool stuff, so go check it out. The third really common personality trait with our inner critic is the victim. The victim. They have the hardest life. Their life is difficult, it's hopeless, and it's unfair. They were just dealt a crappy deck of cards and they can't make any progress. And it's not their fault. It's because it's impossible for them to get past their obstacles. I mean, after all, they weren't given the tools, the smarts, or any help. And even though other people should always try to help the victim, they just never do. The victim is often lonely and just can't catch a break. Does that sound familiar? I'm sure you know someone who plays the victim card. Not to take away from any true victims out there. Again, we're just talking about inner critic personalities. But if your Deb plays the victim, then you need to rein that in. And you need to do that by using exercises that will reinforce the ability to be in control, because victims feel that they have no control. So you want to take that power back, and you can do that through activities in the growth mindset realm, like we talked about with the last personality trait, or by keeping a gratitude journal, even volunteering or working with those less fortunate to help your inner critic kind of recognize what true hardship is. The fourth inner critic personality trait is the perfectionist. If your Deb is a perfectionist, then she is never going to tell you, good job, or that you're good enough at anything. Instead, she will constantly be telling you to be better, do better, look better, be the best, etc. She loves comparison, and she seeks validation from others. She's concerned with achievement and being good enough. She often stops you from taking leaps of faith or attempting something that's challenging because she's so concerned with being perfect and so fearful of making mistakes. She doesn't let you ever rest or be content with the progress that you've made or the accomplishments that you've acquired. She often causes you to procrastinate too, because a perfectionist Deb doesn't want to start something unless she knows that she can do it perfectly and not experience any setbacks. So often it's like, why start to begin with? If your Deb is a perfectionist, no problem. We can also rewire your Deb. What I suggest would be to look into Mel Robbins and her 5-minute rule. That's a great one for just getting started and to prevent inaction or procrastination. There are also way more strategies for how to avoid procrastination. I also suggest you do a gratitude journal and maybe recite some positive affirmations about yourself daily. You also want to complete exercises that will help you develop a growth mindset and help your inner critic to recognize that there are learnings that come from failure or setbacks. Okay, so those are the 4 most common personality traits of the inner critic: the worrier, the critic, the victim, and the perfectionist. As promised, I said I was going to tell you which personality traits my poor little Deb has, my own inner critic. Well, when I first started this journey at investigating my inner critic, then ignoring, protecting, and observing my inner critic, I would say I was about 40% perfectionist, 40% critic, and 20% worrier. And I want to correct myself. I wasn't. Deb was. I mean, Deb is a force to be reckoned with. But since starting these reprogramming exercises, and please reminder to watch my other video on inner critic, and that will give you a concrete exercise to use at the very end. But since I've done that, I would say my inner Deb is now only about 20% perfectionist, 30% critic, 10% worrier, and 40% cheerleader. So look at that progress. She is getting better. The critic personality has been the hardest one for me to tame. I have to be honest. I have a strong critic in Deb, but she's also had many years of reinforcement to develop those traits, so I just have to keep at her. Okay, so let's talk about the main takeaways from today's video. Number 1, we are not our inner critic, hence naming it. Number 2, we want to ignore, protect, and observe our inner critic. So it's really crucial for us to understand what the inner critic's thoughts are and figure out the best ways that we can protect and tame them. And then the last takeaway from today is that there are 4 common personalities among our inner critic: the worrier, the critic, the victim, and the perfectionist, and that there are ways to combat or reprogram all 4. Now time for your action items or homework or fun work, as I like to call it. I want you to determine what your inner critic's personality is. It could be a combination of personality traits like mine was with different percentages breakdown. Sorry, that's the math nerd in me. And based on your answer, I would like you to pick one of the traits that your inner critic, your Deb, seems to hold, and I want you to work on the steps I explained in order to tame it. Oh, and if you haven't named your inner critic yet, you got to do that too, okay? That's also part of your fun work. And I'm telling you, it helps. I know it seems crazy. It probably seems like I'm a lunatic. Maybe I am, but it helps. Okay, so that's all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please click the like button below and make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. See you next week.